All right, everyone, welcome back. This is episode, one, the first real episode of This Might Get Personal, the podcast. And I'm back after our first little trailer. Thank you, everyone who's taken the time to listen, to give me some feedback, send me messages, or just vibe with me. We're just getting started, and it's really nice so far, the sort of feedback and thoughts that people have shared in response to that first trailer. And like I said before, this is not scripted. This is a completely raw, unedited, um, unproduced sort of content. And the goal here is to keep it that way as much as possible. I think there's space and a place for production and things like that. However, in my experience, some of the most unique and divine interventions happen when things go off script. And actually, so much to the point that reminds me about when I used to, I don't know if I mentioned this already or not. So I have a background. I used to be an EMT working in emergency medicine. I was working on an ambulance where I was specializing in psychiatric emergencies. I was working with psych wards. I was working with jails, and I was working with 5150s. And after that, I moved into working with drug and alcohol treatment center. I'm so sorry. I'm all scattered talking right now because I've just been super excited to sit down and talk about this. And I have so many things to really talk about. It's so much, it's hard to really, when I'm just so early on, to be able to share these things in a way that actually kind of makes sense to the listener. Because for me, I mean, let's be honest, for me, it hardly makes any sense anyways. But I'll give you a little bit background about me. The reason I'm starting this podcast is because 9 years ago, and I mentioned this already, I experienced a very traumatic loss of two people who were very close to me over the span of 45 days. And for the last 9 years, I have been working through that. And it wasn't my first experience with loss. I had experienced a really traumatic loss before that from another close friend who, I'll just be frank, they, they were expecting me to pick them up from a party that night. I wasn't able to. And they got behind the wheels and they drove themselves through a steel gate, an iron gate, and their life ended that way. And it's for years I used to have this recurring nightmare driving in my car, picking them up, and like I was supposed to, and their corpse being in the car next to me, and us like being driving around space in the universe, driving around space, and the car always ended at. And I'm sorry if this is traumatic. I'll move on from this in a second. But the drive would always end at his mom's house, his front porch, where his mom. And I remember hearing the screams the morning of everything. Just you could hear the screams coming from blocks away. And I used to have this recurring dream over and over about that situation. And then we do the math. And then 5 years after that is when I experienced these two deaths that I'm mentioning now that happened 9 years ago, which really sent me kind of over the edge because after that first death, I was already taking a lot of responsibility from it. And it really sent me into a place where I felt like I needed to really work on, making a life that could be that, that they could be proud of, and that would be sort of like a redemption for what I felt like I had messed up on. And I did that so much to the point that when my two friends passed away, when I lost my two next friends, one of which was my first love, and the other one was which was my first kiss, both in the span of 45 days. I look back on it, and there was calls and messages that I didn't respond to at the time because I was working two jobs and I had so many responsibilities. Like I said before, I've been on my own since I was 15 and such. And so I just really felt like I dropped the ball on so much. And after that time period, I really tried, really tried to move through it all. I went to like grieving groups. I went to all these other things, and nothing worked. The only thing that thankfully got me through any of it was being a martial artist. I found martial arts at one point, actually, funnily enough, got into martial arts because of one of the guys that my friend who overdosed, who was my first love, he and I had always been really close friends ever since middle school. If you listen to some of my other content, you'll hear I talk about in middle school, we used to pass notes together. We used to rap, we used to write raps, and we would like rap to each other. We were really, we were just nerds and stuff. And we had we had a really good friendship. And as we got a little bit older, other girls really didn't like that. They did not like that I was close to this guy, and we weren't dating. We were just having a really close friendship. And we dated later on, but I used to get in fights with other girls who would literally corner me, or actually not just corner me, they would like trap me in like a cul-de-sac, like a dead end street. You know what I mean? They would block me in with their cars. And it was all because I was just literally doing nothing more than being this this friends with my friend who I had known since elementary school. And these are girls who had met him in high school and, felt like they had whatever. So, bring it back to my point. The reason I got into martial arts is not necessarily to learn how to fight, but to learn how to fight without seriously injuring someone to the point where I would be responsible for their medical bills. Because growing up, I only knew like two moves growing up because I grew up very like in the streets, I guess you would say. And so there was there was like two moves that like I knew from like being in the street, and it usually ended up with like people getting their jaws wired shut and shit like that. And I was like, I can't. And so I remember being in a fight with this girl, and she was like drunk, and she had like cornered me in this cul-de-sac, and there was two girls. It wasn't just one. It was never just one girl. It was never just one girl trying to fight me. And I remember just like being in this fight with this girl and thinking how scared I was that I was going to cause damage that I didn't want to cause. And so, anyways, I got into martial arts because it occurred to me that martial arts is the solution, because you can learn how to disarm someone, put them to sleep or things like that without causing serious damage to where you have to deal with attorneys and hospital bills and that whole hoopla and everything. So anyways, thankfully during the time period where I lost my first love and my first kiss in this span of 45 days, I had already been practicing martial arts. So despite the fact that like every book I read and every group I went to, none of that helped. None of it affected me in any sort of helpful way. If anything, I think those things made me feel worse in some way. So thankfully I had martial arts as an outlet, because when you experience things emotionally, you also have the physiological counterpart of that. And so being able to at least channel and use my body in a way was something that I leaned into heavily. So I started training probably, if I could manage, I would do 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours at night. I was training a minimum of 4 hours to 6 hours a day. I mean, I was doing martial arts, I was doing powerlifting, I was doing running, I was really doing a lot of stuff, and I was not letting myself basically have any space for going down a bad road, myself, because obviously I was, and I was by myself. I was living by myself. I didn't have any contact with family. I didn't have any close friends at that time, because really what I was going through was so just messy and heavy that either, I didn't want to bring it up to people because it was only just a downer for everyone else. And I noticed very early on in trying to do so that people don't want to be around downers. And then I realized that I can't be around people if I'm not being authentically myself, which was a downer at the time, And so I just really withdrew myself. I took a big step back from every community that I was a part of and every friendship that I had, because I could no longer remain the same. And there's a blessing and a curse, because I was able to not like disassociate from that and sort of go through that whole time period of processing, and not just processing, but integration, like integrating these experiences and these awarenesses with the person who I'm supposed to become. Because I swear to God, the only thing that got me through any of this was the understanding that I have to keep working for something that's going to sort of make it all full circle, make it all make sense, to bring a purpose to these tragic losses that I experienced that are tragic and are serious losses, you guys. These are serious losses to humanity. And I'm still very, like, I still, over the years, these people are still constant variables in my life. I think about them a lot. But it's something that I've integrated a lot through over the years. And yeah, so thankfully, when that happened, I leaned heavily into martial arts. I really took a big step back from everything, and I started listening to the universe a lot more. I mean, because everywhere I go, I remember, and I wasn't sleeping a lot, so I spent a lot of time up at night, and I'd be looking up at the moon, and I remember one day I decided that I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was so fucking exhausted, excuse my language. I was so exhausted from being, right, just angry, because no, anywhere I went, I just looked around and I saw people who didn't have the same, you know, grievances as I did and whatnot. And everyone was just going about the world like everything's fine and dandy. And for me, it was not. And I was just so sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I don't know what did it or how, but I've read, I actually really used to read the dictionary growing up and everything. But anyways, I've heard of the word grateful. I heard of the word grateful, but I didn't really know how to embody it. I didn't know how to be grateful at the time. And this is honestly, truthfully, and I wasn't even planning to talk about this right now, but this decision that I made is probably the biggest and most important decision I have ever made in my entire life. And I kid you not. So what I decided was that I'm by myself. I have no friends, no partner, no boyfriend, no support, no nothing. And I decided I'm going to teach myself. I'm going to literally teach myself how to be grateful. And that was a bumpy road. That was not an easy thing to do, especially in the beginning. It's one of those mind over matter things. And I just knew that I could not escape from this life because they would be so upset if I did. My friends who passed away, my loved ones who are no longer with us, I cannot express to you the disappointment. You know what I mean? They all like, oh God, from all of them, just I've never met it's I've never met people with so much life in them. Even still, I've never met people who just have so much life in them. You know what I'm saying? And it's it's mind blowing, and people who had already endured so much in life, you think, wow, these people are tough as nails. Like nothing's gonna kill them. Nothing's gonna kill them. These people are tough as nails. And then, oh, I'm gonna cry. And then it happens, and it's unbelievable. And so, anyways, teaching myself how to be grateful is hands down the most important decision I've ever made for myself. And I can't tell you exactly how I did it. I just know that I had to consciously one day decide that I was no longer going to allow myself to not feel grateful for whatever it is I can feel grateful for. And so it started in really like small ways. Like I sort of have like a sick sense of humor in some ways too. So, if I was to like drop my coffee, instead of being like fucking pissed, I'd just be like, oh, that's nice. And even if I wasn't fully meaning it at first, I continued to give myself these sort of prompts to prompt myself to this sort of self-dialogue. And let me tell you, it truly made every difference in the world. I cannot tell you. And it's what's made me thrive in my careers, especially working in emergency medicine and addiction treatment. I mean, these are truly some of the, because you can't train. You can read all the textbooks you want. You can go to all the schools and you can have all the licenses you want. But life does not happen on script. It is, you can try to make it on script as much as you want, but you're either in denial or you're missing the point. And so, anyways, learning how to be grateful and how to, really expand my threshold for life is another way that I've always sort of looked at it, because analogies are everything for me. You know what I mean? Analogies are, I'll just give you an example. I remember the first analogy I ever came up with was when I was dating this guy. And this was before this was over 9 years ago. So this was before this had happened. And I was dating this guy, and I don't know, he was a good guy or whatever, but it wasn't working. Like we were just coming from two different perspectives, and he just couldn't understand what it was. And so I went for a really long walk one day, and I came back with this analogy. I was like, it's like we're out at dinner. And I use the analogy. It's like we're out at dinner at a steakhouse, and we're eating. Well, we both order. The waiter comes to our table, and we both order. And we what we both see or think that's happening is that we're both ordering the same thing. We both think that we're ordering the same meal, except we didn't. So what he doesn't know is I ordered the spaghetti and meatballs. I thought maybe he ordered the spaghetti and meatballs too, but he ordered the steak and potatoes, and he thought I ordered the steak and potatoes too. So when the waiter comes back with our food, he's trying to be nice and help me by putting A1 steak sauce on my spaghetti and meatballs. And I'm trying to put Parmesan and marinara on his steak and potatoes. You see where I'm going with this? So it wasn't that we were trying to be, unhelpful. We were trying to help each other, but the fact is that we were both unaware of the fact that we had both been served different dishes, even though from our own perspectives, it looked like we were getting the same dish. But from, but the way it really was is we were both eating a different dish. And so even though we were trying to help each other, I'm putting the Parmesan on his steak and potatoes, and he's putting the A1 on my spaghetti and meatballs, and we're just getting so angry with each other. And then we were both getting hurt about the fact that us trying to help that person is unhelpful, and it's just running us around and around and around. And so I don't know where I'm going with this, but analogies are something that has been a huge tool for me personally in my own experiences and my own growth and my own awareness and understanding, because truly what I think it comes down to is being able to widen your threshold for life. You can have, what's the phrase? I think Lao Tzu, who was a philosopher from like 300 BC, has a famous quote saying that knowledge without wisdom is like sand in the water. It just muddies the water. And so, and this is true. It's just like that saying where you have to be really cautious about unearned wisdom or things like that. So widening your threshold for life is another huge key that has helped me unlock a lot of my own skills and talents and things like that. Because I think a lot of times in life, you read a book or you listen to a podcast, or you could even go to like a doctor or therapist or things like that, and they'll say, follow these steps, do this, listen to me, come back on Tuesday. And it's like, okay, great. But at the same time, none of that is necessarily returning our innate skill tools that we have. I always like to envision it like we're all wearing a tool belt around our waist. And what we want is to be able to we don't need to go around in life and gather tools. That's not the point. The goal is to be able to recognize the tools on your belt and to know how to use them and to get better at using them. Imagine today you go into a workshop, a woodworking shop or a metal shop or things like that. And maybe you're not familiar with these things. So you walk in today and you look on the wall and everywhere around and you say, what are these things? I don't know what any of these things are. However, they are the most most appropriate tools for the job. The thing is, you can't get the job done until you know which tool to use for what. And that's the thing too, is you can know how a tool works, but if you don't know how to use it for the intended purpose, it's not doing you any good. And so really learning how to widen my threshold for life in the ways that are in alignment with who we are, with our own being, with our psyche and with our body, and to be able to do that intuitively and independently, because that's the other aspect of that's the other really important thing that I like to emphasize when I talk about the tool belt. And these are talks that I used to have every day in my office when I was a medical provider in a rehab. And the rehab I worked in was in this mansion in the marina in San Francisco overlooking Prison Field at Golden Gate Park. This is beautiful 8 or 6 bedroom house where we had high level executives and things who were coming in for addiction treatments. And we would sit in our office every day for the 30 to 60 days that they were with them. They would come in, they would close my office door, and we would sit and we would have these lengthy conversations about life. And I would really try to understand, because these are people who have the resources and the means to get the best treatment. They've been to the best. They've been to the Betty Ford. They've been to all of the really, really nice, really expensive treatment centers. But it's like a revolving door. They come in, they get better, they go out, they relapse, and it just all this thing over and over. And and I really tried to understand, like, what is it what's missing from all of this? And, because they go to all these centers that a lot of them have better resources than mine did. But and what I learned from my patients is that what I was able to help them with the most is helping them understand the tools that lie on their own belts. Because a lot of times you go to places and spaces where people are, like I was saying earlier, sign up for my newsletter, read my book, take my master class, come back on Tuesday. But that doesn't really give you, they're just keeping you kind of on a leash, right? That doesn't even, what I want to do is to have a flashlight, and I just want to shine it on your hip and say, there's your tool. You know what I'm saying? And until you have someone or something in life that shows you what you are already innately have, what tools you innately have on your own person, you're kind of in this revolving door. You know what I'm saying? And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to do those things if it's helping at all. However, I don't think it's fair to do that in lieu of recognizing the tools that you have. And, this is so important. It's so important because life, like I was saying earlier, does not happen. You can't produce life. It doesn't happen on a schedule. It doesn't happen on a script. It's all off script. I mean, so ridiculously off script, to the point that when I was working in the rehab, shit would just get, sorry, excuse my language, stuff would just get so haywire a lot of times that we would have this running joke, inside joke. And after something really crazy would happen, like I could tell you some things. We would look at each other and be like, and scene. Like, did that just happen? What? Like, that was, you know what I mean? And we would just say, and scene, because it's just crazy divine. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I have felt closer to God in a rehab in some of these insanely chaotic moments than I have ever felt in any church, in any religious establishment I have ever in my life, ever. Not even remotely close. And I mean, like, palpable. You feel that energy. And so I say all this to say, when you are able to fully, at least, discover more and more of these tools on your own belt, that allows you to stop going through this revolving door. Because now you don't have to wait for an appointment. You don't have to wait for someone to call you back. You don't have to need the insurance for a copay, because that's the whole other thing too. A lot of times people have so much anxiety about needing to maintain their insurance, and whether that be through a job that they hate, the job that could be even leading to their addiction. It's like, it's a really tricky situation. And this brings me back to some of my other experience I had, where one of my first real jobs that I ever had was, well, not my first, but I used to be a veterinary technician at a specialty clinic for animals with skin diseases. And as with pretty much all diseases or conditions, but especially with skin diseases, you're never, the problem is never the symptom that is most visible to you. It is always an underlying symptom. So that's a whole nother sort of thing, is actually is a really, really, really cool job that I got to do. We were doing a lot of microscopy and lab work and things like that. It was sort of like crime. It was like an investigation, forensics, what I'm looking for. But anyways, and so you have to really look at the underlying symptoms for why the main symptom is presenting, because and I can't think of any condition or disease or anything in life where it's ever the main presenting symptom that is the cause or the culprit. It's almost always the underlying conditions. And if you can sort of train yourself, get your mind to more so focus on those things, the ROI, the reward on investment, doing things that way is tenfold, 20-fold. It's huge. It's so much bigger than just addressing things by the surface level concerns. So yeah, that was a little bit of a kind of messy sort of rant, but this is how these conversations are going to go until I get some other people to come on here and start having more conversations with me, which it looks like we're gonna have really soon here too. Have some really awesome guests lined up, and looking forward to those conversations as well. So again, thank you so much for listening. This is the probably the most unproduced podcast you've listened to lately, but I commend you for listening to and for trying that out, because honestly, it's good for us to just sort of have that sort of exposure to life unrehearsed, to life unproduced, because like it or not, that's how it goes. And you'll see me in some other places and spaces where I do things that are more produced. I definitely have that, and I do practice that in things, but I sort of can't do that without doing this, if that makes sense. And so thank you again so much for being here. This Might Get Personal podcast, because I never know where this is going to go. We just have sort of a space to talk about things, and it just might get personal. So thanks for being here. And please, if you have any feedback or thoughts, share them with me. I'd really love to hear what you think of this, what it sort of, instilled in you, or what it's sort of, what are you taking away from this? What are your thoughts and your feelings leaving this conversation? And also, did it bring up any questions that you have about yourself or about me? Ask me questions. I'm totally an open book. I have zero secrets. I'm a very flawed person. I am, absolutely a work in progress. And I am always, always trying to learn from people who know better than me. So please, if you have anything to share, please let me know. I want to hear from you. You can email at thismightgetpersonalpod@gmail.com, or you can contact me directly at Karina Officinalis, which is my handle on IG, Karina Officinalis, which is a misnomer for Melissa Officinalis, which is the Latin name for Tulsi, which is one of my favorite herbs. Some of you may not know this about me already, but I have a botanical apothecary where I create botanical formulations from herbs to fungi and so much more that help sort of bridge the gap between pharmaceutical remedies and psychedelic remedies, because a lot of people don't realize it, but there's so much, so much in that in between, in that no man's land. And it's critical that we gain awareness of these elements, because these are also what most of pharmaceuticals are based off of. Almost every pharmaceutical is based off of either, an organic compound or a botanical. And so I'm really hoping with my brand, it's called Soulcraft Apotheca, You can check us out at soulcraftapotheca.com. We're also on IG at soulcraftapotheca, and we're on Shopify, and we're on Etsy. Please come check us out. There's everything from beeswax candles that I make and hand pour myself, which, by the way, beeswax is better than soy wax candles. They have negative ions, which soy wax doesn't. The negative ions help pull the pollutants out of the air in your home. So beeswax candles all the way, you guys. Also, the color of beeswax candles have immensely different effects on our circadian rhythm. So if you're at home and you have soy candles lit all over your house, they alter your circadian rhythm significantly different or significantly more than a beeswax candle does. So switch over to beeswax candles and see how much it improves your physiological reaction to them. So anyways, yeah, check us out, soulcraftapotheca.com. We have everything from teas. There's so many things. If you're someone that has pain relief, if you have anxiety, if you have some sort of inflammation, or so much more on there. If you want to learn how to grow your own mushrooms, that's another thing that I do. It's really, really fun to grow your own mushrooms. I have everything from all-in-one grow kits to liquid syringes and culture plates and things that you can have at your home and do for yourself. So it's really a choose your own adventure type of thing. And again, thank you so much for being here, you guys. My name's Karina. This Might Get Personal, the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye, guys. Take care. Mwah.